Right guys, I promised you a handheld review, and today I want to start off with the Nintendo's Game Boy Advance. Now, the Game Boy Advance is probably one of my favourite Game Boys. Not technically, but just overall, it's probably my favourite Game Boy. The Game Boy Advance, the original Game Boy Advance, came out in 2001, and it came out to replace the Game Boy Color. Originally in 1989, Nintendo released their original Game Boy. Later they released them in various colours called the Play It Loud series. Then we got the Game Boy Pocket, and in Japan they also got the Game Boy Light, which was a Game Boy Pocket with a backlight. Then later after that we got the Game Boy Color. And then around 1996, 1997 there was rumours of a new handheld coming from Nintendo. And it wasn't until 2001 that we actually got it, and it was called the Game Boy Advance. So let's take a look at this one. Similar to most of the Game Boys, this came in numerous different colours. This one is the limited edition platinum colour. Came in like a block purple, a see-through purple, various other colours. The rarest of which is I believe it's a gold one, which was only available from a Pokemon store in New York or the Nintendo World store. I can't remember which one of the two it is. But that's the rarest of them. So let's take a quick look at the box. On the front we've got a picture of the Game Boy. This is a 32-bit system, so it's more powerful than the NES and the SNES. Got usual warnings and whatnot. Bit of information on the back. We've got the picture of the Nintendo GameCube on the back with the Game Boy Advance being used as a controller. And your usual sort of rigmarole just on it. So let's take it up and let's have a quick look at it. So this is quite a nice complete one which I managed to get. So inside originally it came in one of these little bags, and here it is. Here's the Game Boy Advance. Let's come back to that in just a minute. Let's have a look what else we got in the box with it. So you got your usual sort of leaflet / posters. Here's got some examples of some of the games on the back. F-Zero, Super Mario Advance, Mario Kart, some Tony Hawk, some Rayman. And then on the back here we've actually got a picture of some of the other colours. Here we've got the Platinum, the see-through pink, the see-through purple and the block purple. It's showing the 4-way multi-tap. And also showing the AC/DC adapter for the Game Boy Advance. Along with that, we also got some stuff for the N64 showcasing the different colours and whatnot. A few other little posters and leaflets and things, your instructions, your warranties, safety manuals, all that sort of jazz. So let's take a closer look at the actual console itself. So straight away, we've got a speaker down here. We've got Game Boy Advance just here. Got a bit of my reflection there. We've got the power button, power light up here. It goes red when the battery's dying, green when it's on. Nintendo up here. Start select, you've got your D-pad and B and A just there. At the top we've got an introduction, which is a step up from the normal Game Boy. We've got L and R buttons on the shoulder. Some little snaps here, I think your magnifying can snap onto those. We've got the cartridge slot, and here we've got the extension port for your link cables and things. Down here we've got an on-off switch down the bottom, headphone jack, and again a volume dial rather than buttons. On the back a little bit of information. I've got the tri-ring screwdriver slots as well, and this was, I believe it's the last Game Boy to need batteries rather than a rechargeable battery. They later replaced the Game Boy Advance with the Game Boy Advance SP, and then that was later replaced with the Game Boy Micro, and since then all of Nintendo's handhelds they have to use chargers rather than actual batteries, which is a lot better for us really. Now, if we take an example of a couple of original Game Boy games, we're all kind of used to, or you might be used to this sort of game, sort of quite big, chunky games. Well, for the Game Boy Advance, they pretty much they managed to half the size of them almost into these much smaller cartridges. So if we compare between the two, you can see here that they're definitely a lot smaller. Now, the Game Boy Advance, they slot in the top, and they fit quite snug in the back, quite flush just at this top part. And if we turn it on, you can see we've got the power light just there. You're not going to be able to see it very well because unfortunately the Game Boy Advance does not have a backlight, however the Game Boy Advance SP does. So here we've got the microphone, the speaker just here. Got a bit of Zelda going on there. Now, as well as being able to play all the Game Boy Advance games, you can also play original Game Boy games. They stick out the top. We pop it in. And there we are. Now, when you're playing an original Game Boy game, the L and R buttons up here, they change the screen size. So you might be able to see that's the original Nintendo Game Boy size. And if you want to stretch the image slightly, you tap the L button. So that was quite interesting. Now, a lot of games for this were absolutely fantastic on their own merit. However, Nintendo did actually port a lot of games from their other consoles onto this system as well. So for instance, here we have the NES Classics line. This is Castlevania, and here we've got The Legend of Zelda. Now these are ports of the original Nintendo games from the NES system onto the Game Boy Advance, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And of course, with it being a 32-bit system, whereas the NES was an 8-bit system, it can play them really, really well. Personally, I prefer playing the SP just because it's got the backlight, but overall I prefer the Game Boy Advance, the original one. I just love how it's the horizontal sort of control to it, whereas the normal Game Boys, Game Boy Colors and Game Boy Pockets were all sort of vertical. But I really do just prefer this sort of horizontal grip onto it, which they carried on throughout the Game Boy Micro and of course the DS systems as well. A lot of games, like I said, were ported as the NES Classics line. I forget how many were actually done, but they also started making other games for it as well, and porting other games. So here we have Super Mario Advance 4, which is actually Super Mario Bros. 3. There was numerous other games, and overall it's just an absolutely fantastic system. So it's probably my favourite Game Boy. A few things let it down. I say the backlight's probably the biggest deal clencher for me. If it had a backlight, it would be phenomenal. It's the only reason I don't really play it as much these days, just because we're living in times now where we're used to getting backlights for everything, and we take them for granted, I guess. Whereas back in the day, you had to sort of sit here with this sort of thing, aiming it right so you get the light just on it just right. You couldn't tuck under the covers at bed with one of these when you was a kid, unless you got a little magnifier glass snap-on that went over the top. Something that's really good with this system as well is you can actually connect it to your Nintendo GameCube for certain games. I know, I think it was Final Fantasy Tactics, you could use it as a controller and use it for various things. But it was nice how they combined it with the Nintendo GameCube, so there's more you could do with it. Don't really know what else to say really. It's just an absolutely fantastic system. Doesn't really weigh a great deal. I think it looks fantastic. I think just the overall design of it is absolutely beautiful. So yeah, that's my sort of brief overview and quick review of the Game Boy Advance. Probably going to be doing some more handheld reviews soon, so definitely check those out. And until then guys, cheers for watching.